I'm Steve Wilkerson, and I'm with Jim Saunders, Executive Editor of the News Service of Florida. Jim, we're in the final 2 weeks of session, and there's a sense in the Capitol that there really is an impasse between the House and the Senate over the budget because of the significant differences between the two bodies and the funding of health care, specifically Medicaid and the low-income pool. And maybe going into a special session or an extension of session, let's talk about all of that. And it's going to wander, I think, in different directions. But what is your sense of all of this?
Well, first off, I do think that they're going to go into a special session or extended session. Senator Tom Lee, the Senate Budget Chairman, last week said as much, and the House Speaker Steve Christophilly pretty much agreed. So I think we don't know yet how that will play out, whether it would be a special session sometime later in May or June even, or extending the current session. But the session's supposed to end on May 1st. And by this point, they should be really gearing up for some serious budget negotiations. And everything's been put on hold because of these healthcare issues that you alluded to. And those healthcare issues, by holding this up, are holding up other issues as well. So because the budget is the end game in a lot of circumstances in the legislature, and so until they can get that process going, things are kind of on hold. They're moving a lot of bills around the Capitol, but in terms of the big picture stuff, it's pretty much moving pretty slow.
Well, you and I have been around for a number of years. You fewer than me, but anyway, we've heard these rumors before. You know, and all of a sudden somebody comes up with an idea and everything opens up and everything gets done. But there really is a sense, isn't there, that there's a real impasse?
Well, part of the issue is that there are so many different parties at play in this healthcare issue, and it seems like they keep throwing bombs that sort of make the situation even more tenuous, if you will.
Like the governor's bomb last week.
I mean, the governor last week said that he was going to sue the federal government for this issue relating to the LIP funding. Just to back up for a second, earlier in the week, what's going on here is the Senate has proposed a plan to expand health care coverage to about 800,000 people. They'd use federal money that would be available under the Affordable Care Act, sort of like a Medicaid expansion, though the Senate says it's not a Medicaid expansion. The House has flatly said, no, we're not doing that. The governor has said, no, we're not doing that. And meanwhile, the state is trying to negotiate with the federal government to extend the low-income pool program, which is a $2.2 billion program. That's
separate from Medicaid.
Separate from the Medicaid issue, but they are in these negotiations. And so the federal government would love to see a Medicaid expansion in Florida. So last week, amidst back and forth, a lot of it coming from the state, really, but the federal government said, yeah, we'd like to link these issues. You want the LIP money? You might want to consider expanding Medicaid, which of course sent the governor and the House, wailing because they don't want to do it. And the governor then threatened and said he will sue the federal government over this issue. So again, this LIP issue is highly technical, highly complex, involves a lot of money, but then there's all these political issues that are piling on top of it, which makes it very difficult to see through the fog and really understand what's going on in terms of resolving that issue.
But the LIP issue really affects not only the bottom lines of a number of major hospitals in the state that care for low-income people, but it could affect the quality of care for those people. We're talking about a couple of $2 billion worth of care, right?
The LIP program is designed as sort of an add-on to Medicaid. Essentially what it does is provide additional funding to help hospitals primarily, there's some other providers get this money, but primarily hospitals, to care for low-income folks, uninsured folks. So the hospitals, particularly the big hospital systems that care for a lot of indigent patients, are very dependent, very reliant on this money. So it has a lot of meaning for them. You know, there's also issues about, well, if they don't get reimbursed for this care, who pays for it? Because people are going to show up in the emergency room anyway. So there's a lot of concern that, you know, the hospitals may pass on more costs to insurers, which could go down to businesses and, you know, individuals paying for insurance. So it goes a lot of different directions. I think the people I've spoken with seem to think the state is going to get a cut in this in LIP funding regardless. And if that happens, you know, the legislature may be confronted with trying to figure out a way to make these hospitals whole, which could cost some money.
All right, let's talk about some of the major players right now who are dealing with this issue. Well, first of all, you talked about the governor and what he's done. So, do you want to say anything else about the governor?
Well, no, I just think this lawsuit is one more thing that's kind of log on the fire, if you will. You know, the other thing that's interesting about the lawsuit is we've talked to some people on both sides of the issue. They don't think the lawsuit's going to really affect this short-term LIP funding issue because the state's fiscal year starts July 1st. And, you know, depending on when the lawsuit's filed and how much litigation's involved, it's probably not going to be resolved by July 1st. So that is another element to this.
Well, then we have the Speaker, Mr. Crisafulli, and our Senate President, Mr. Gardner. They entered the session with a 5-point plan that they were going to work on, and good friends. The Senate President has a constituent in Mr. Crisafulli, and they were in lockstep together. Is there tension between them now that you're beginning to see because of these issues?
I haven't really seen any personal animosity or anything between the Senate President and the House Speaker, but clearly between the Senate and the House at this point, there's tension. I mean, there's clearly, and Gardner, you know, he works for a hospital system down in the Orlando area. He wants, their position is they need the LIP funding, and that sort of this Medicaid expansion or healthcare expansion could help alleviate whatever cuts may come in LIP, or if they don't get the LIP money, that's another way to serve that same population of low-income folks. So, you know, the Senate President's very strong on this. He wants it. But the House Speaker has been very resolute in saying, you know, the House has never wanted to expand Medicaid since the Affordable Care Act was passed. And he said the House doesn't have any appetite to do it. Another key player in the House is Richard Corcoran, who's the Appropriations Chairman, who got up on the floor a couple weeks ago and just flat out said, it is not happening in the House. Kind of threw down the gauntlet, if you will.
And he's the Appropriations
Chairman. He's the Appropriations
Chairman.
Chairman. He's the next Speaker. So, you know, he's got a lot of power. So, you know, there's clearly tension between the House and the Senate at this point. And that's why we're in this situation with the budget.
And on the Senate side, you've got former Senate President Tom Lee, and he's, I think, Appropriations Chairman as well, an experienced hand at negotiations and can be a very tough character when he needs to be. So you've got, and he's covering the basis for the Senate. So you've got some major players involved in this.
Yeah, the budget negotiations anyway would be interesting between Tom Lee and Richard Corcoran. But there's two pretty strong personalities, let's put it that way. But when you have this issue, and if Senator Lee is indeed, you know, sort of the front man or the point man, if you will, for the Senate on these healthcare issues, it could be some pretty pointed discussions.
If it weren't so serious, it would be a great subject for reality TV.
Well, I mean, the other thing is that you know, there's a whole lot of issues out there that are up in the air because of all this. I mean, you know, the governor's proposed $670 million worth of tax cuts, and we have no idea where the Senate is on any of that at this point because they're sitting back saying, we might have to fund health care. Are we going to do these tax cuts? So, you know, there's a lot of other ramifications out there that this creates.
Thank you, Jim. For more news about Florida government and politics, visit the Advances section of our website.